Hey everyone, and welcome to Quick Review. Today I'm looking at Katana Zero. Honestly, this is probably going to be a pretty unpopular opinion. I was pretty excited for this game. When I first heard about it, I had just finished playing through The Messenger, and was super excited to play another similarly styled game. With that said, Katana Zero and The Messenger have almost nothing in common outside of the styles of the game. Katana Zero is basically an incredibly short, story-driven game that provides combat that you pretty much never have to understand or master. Here's the thing, I was incredibly disappointed in Katana Zero. It took me a grand total of 3 hours to get through the entire game. This wasn't even a straight playthrough. At some point, I went back to change a decision that I made and continue along. So it took me 3 hours with backtracking that I opted to go for. 3 hours to get through a story that, while well executed and well told, was incredibly predictable and had very little depth to it. Seriously, after the second mission of the game, I felt like I pretty much knew what was going to happen. By the time I got to the end, I was almost entirely correct. With that said, the aesthetics and the story of the game are without a doubt the strongest point. The game looks absolutely incredible. There is so much detail in every single person and area that you encounter. I can't begin to imagine the amount of time and effort that went into the visuals in this game. Even with the relatively short story, there are so many branching decisions that do impact how certain situations play out, and I revisited some chapters just to see what would happen if I had interacted with characters a little differently. They even managed to make selecting dialogue options interesting. When you're having a conversation, you almost always have the power to cut off whomever you're speaking to, or wait for them to finish saying what they have to say. It's an interesting idea, and it makes you feel like you are contributing a lot more to the story than you would in a normal story with branching dialogue options. Hands down, it's the most enjoyable implementation of dialogue selection I've ever seen, and I honestly didn't think that's something I would ever be saying. There's a lot of good here, however there's also some bad. What I feel was forgotten with Katana Zero was actually making Katana Zero a game. There is combat, and there are missions that you take part in. There are different ways you can approach each mission as well. There are different goals you can try to achieve while on those missions. Side objectives, basically. The issue is mainly that there's so little actual playtime in this game that you never get to enjoy any of the combat set in front of you. The missions go by way too quickly. Once you have a general understanding of how movement, slowing down time, and deflection works, you can breeze through almost every scenario in front of you. I think it was the second mission of the game. I spent maybe 5 to 10 minutes digging through the story before the mission began. Running through the mission itself took me only a few minutes at most. I didn't actually time it, but it 100% took less time to complete the mission than it did to listen to the story that came before and after it. The third mission felt even shorter. This is partly a result of the lack of difficulty in Katana Zero as well. Initially, it seems that you're going to have to get used to combat, practice, become some sort of katana-wielding god. But that's never something that happens. There's a checkpoint after every room, and each room is so short that for the most part you can just run at enemies over and over again until you figure out the couple of buttons you need to press to make it through that room. In fact, I don't remember a single time where I was satisfied with completing a room in this game. I never sat there and said, wow, that felt good. Because one of two things happens. You either breeze through a room, no problem, or you're faced with a minor roadblock. You die a few times and you just keep killing yourself until something works. I don't think I spent more than 5 minutes on any section of this game. I also think that's a pretty generous estimate. There's also a whole mechanic where you can pick items up and throw them at people as well, but as I progressed it seemed less and less necessary, and by the end of the game I had almost completely forgotten about it. It's also worth mentioning that there are some secrets littered around the missions, but they're few and far between. That's pretty much Katana Zero. I feel like it was more of an interactive story than it was a game. That's in part because the most enjoyable aspect of this game was dealing with and managing branching dialogue trees. Somehow they actually made that enjoyable. If you want to play a game where you feel like a badass with a sword, The Messenger, that's a game where you can feel like a badass with a sword. Also, one other thing I think I need to mention, the game is super short, and without spoiling anything, at some point you do realize that there will be more content in the future. It's impossible for me to see what this future looks like or to understand how the game could potentially be expanded, but there is some foundation for expansion in the future, which honestly needs to happen, because there were so many unresolved storylines, and at the end of the game I was genuinely surprised that the game was over, because so few questions had actually been answered. I personally can't recommend this game, but if you want to spend a few hours playing through a decent yet predictable story in a beautifully crafted pixel art world, maybe give it a try. And don't forget, this is just in my opinion. If you feel like I left something out, disagree, or just want to suggest something for me to look at, leave a comment. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I try to put out 2 or 3 reviews a week, so if you enjoyed this, feel free to subscribe, check back weekly, or, either of those things, whatever makes you happy.